Ubisoft merely fumbled Far Cry 7. Or are we watching a publisher prove in public that it no longer knows how to make one of its own flagship games, without turning the whole process into a warning label? Because this thing does not sound delayed. It sounds misplaced, it sounds bruised, and it sounds like somebody found it under 3 reorg charts, 2 cancelled projects, and a pile of investor-friendly adjectives. On April 19, Gaming Bible pushed the latest rumor wider and cited insider reporting that the next Far Cry had gone through hell and back. This followed earlier expectations that the new mainline entry might have landed in 2026. Put that next to the simple fact that Far Cry 6 came out in October 2021, and suddenly the problem is not hard to read. One of Ubisoft's most reliable brands has now been offstage for years. The loudest fresh signal attached to it is not confidence, it is trouble. And that is why people reacted. Not because gamers are drama addicts, and not because every leak means doom, because this leak fits the room. If one odd rumor pops up around one game at one healthy company, people shrug and move on. If the same kind of rumor lands inside a publisher that has already been cancelling, delaying, restructuring, and cutting, people stop shrugging. They start staring. Ubisoft had already announced a major strategic reset in January with a revised 3-year roadmap, cost reductions, and a reorganization around key brands. Reuters reported the company was expecting a large operating loss tied partly to cancellations and delays. That is not a calm backdrop. That is a company telling you in corporate language that the machine needed surgery. So let us do the part half these breakdown videos refuse to do, because actual detail takes work. Abridged version. Ubisoft did not just hit one bump with one sequel. Ubisoft admitted the pipeline itself needed to be torn apart and rebuilt. Far Cry was supposed to be one of the safe pillars inside that rebuild, one of the brands you gather around when everything else starts rattling. Instead, the series now feels like the brand people talk about in that lowered voice you use when the family dog eats something expensive and nobody knows who is going to say it first. First, the engine. Because this is where the real breakdown starts, not the perfume cloud narration. Reporting from Insider Gaming said the rumored mainline project, codenamed Blackbird, had moved away from the long-running Dunia tech and towards Snowdrop. It also carries a very strange rumored structure, a story built around rescuing family members within 72 in-game hours, or 24 real hours with time pausing in safe houses. That is not a routine sequel quietly simmering in the background. It sounds like somebody opened the hood, pulled out the familiar parts, and then announced they were also trying a stopwatch for fun. And no, engine shift is not just a nerd phrase to make the video sound smarter. If you are doing the B-roll, give the audience something concrete to watch. When you show Dunia-era Far Cry, do not just throw random explosions on screen and call it analysis. Show grass and brush taking fire. Show how that fire spreads through open terrain in a readable way. Show animals, patrols, and enemies getting caught in a loose chain reaction where the world feels systemic instead of staged. Ubisoft developer material on Far Cry's fire propagation gets into exactly that kind of systems thinking materials, spread, environment, and reaction. That is part of what people mean when they say Far Cry had chaos you could read. Then cut to Snowdrop footage and do not just drool at the pixels. Show the clutter, show the density, and show the dressed up spaces. Show the heavier object count, the richer corners, and the tighter lanes. Snowdrop is powerful tech. Ubisoft and Massive have shown that clearly. It handles detail well and it has powered games with dense environments and strong world state presentation. Fine. But that is not automatically the same thing as proving it can preserve the specific kind of open, readable system-heavy sandbox that Far Cry lives on. That is the concern. Not that Snowdrop is bad. Far Cry does not live or die on being expensive looking. It lives or dies on whether the world stays legible while chaos spreads over open ground. Watch the fire, watch the sightlines, and watch the object density. Watch whether the world feels alive in a loose way or just decorated in a costly one. And if that 72-hour timer rumor is real, the pressure gets worse. A clock-based Far Cry needs quick traversal, clean route reading, and fast loading. It needs systems that do not feel like they are dragging wet cement uphill. You do not get to sell urgency if the world feels heavy in the wrong way. You do not get to sell pressure if the sandbox feels less responsive than the older games. That is why the engine rumor matters. It is not trivia. It is a warning sign with a technical accent. That is also why the timer rumor scares people more than it excites them. On paper, urgency could help Far Cry. In practice, players see a pressure point inside a publisher already rumored to be building an extraction companion project and their brains go exactly where you think they go. No, there is no confirmed early access rumor for Far Cry 7. But the trust is so bad that people can already picture the shape of the pitch. We have seen this pattern before and recently. When I covered Blizzard making Wobble Midnight Early Access via only, the reaction was immediate, exhausted recognition. The industry is no longer satisfied with just selling you a game. They want to sell you the privilege of not being left behind. Premium editions, VIP windows, and special access. It is all just dressed up versions of pay now to make the pressure nicer. That is not a confirmed plan here, it is just the audience telling you how little trust is left in the tank. Then came the confidence performance because of course it did. In February, Yves Guillemot told Variety that Ubisoft had 2 very promising Far Cry projects in development. Wonderful phrase, very polished and very safe. It is very much the kind of sentence a chief executive says when he needs a room full of adults to picture order while somebody behind the wall is hitting a machine with a wrench. Because one of those projects is reportedly the mainline sequel and the other is Maverick, the separate extraction-based Far Cry project. That contrast is the joke. The public here is very promising, but the leaks here hell and back. One side sounds like a brochure. The other sounds like a paramedic report. Second, the exodus. Because engines do not panic by themselves, people do. Dan Hay, one of the central creative figures behind modern Far Cry, left Ubisoft in late 2021 after more than a decade on the franchise. He later resurfaced at Blizzard. That does not prove disaster on its own. But once you combine a veteran lead departure with years of franchise silence, major company restructuring, and rumors of engine changes, people are not irrational for reading instability into the picture. That is not fan paranoia. That is pattern recognition. And that human side gets uglier when you connect it to what former Far Cry director Alex Hutchinson said. He mentioned Ubisoft becoming very allergic to new games with talent drain following behind it. That line matters because it turns the whole story from random rumor soup into organizational diagnosis. A publisher that gets scared does not become bold. It becomes managerial. It becomes slower, safer, flatter, and more likely to grip the exact franchises it thinks should be easiest to control, until those franchises start coming out smooth in all the wrong places. And yes, you can see that fear in the art. Modern blockbuster design keeps chasing a fake audience. This is some imaginary herd of consumers who supposedly want every franchise blander, softer, and flatter. Ubisoft has flirted with that disease for years. The newer house style so often feels pre-sanded, like it was carefully uglified just enough to offend nobody and impress nobody. The older versions were not better because they were pure. They were better because they still had edges. They still felt like somebody made a choice and then lived with it. The newer instinct is always the same. Round it off, remove the flavor, and add a speech. Pretend that defanging a series is the same thing as evolving it. Then stare blankly when the loyal audience starts asking why everything now tastes like hotel eggs. Third, the extraction. Because Ubisoft does not merely chase trends. It has a habit of showing up late, tripping over the furniture, and asking where the monetization went. Insider Gaming's reporting around Maverick and Blackbird matters, because it suggests these are not just two unrelated things sharing a logo. Some movement, inventory, and looting DNA may bleed from the extraction side thinking into the mainline project. That is the point where burned-out players stop hearing creative expansion and start hearing retention architecture. And Ubisoft's own recent history here is not exactly confidence-inspiring. Hyperscape was shut down less than 2 years after launch. The Division Heartland was cancelled later as Ubisoft redirected resources. So when people hear that Ubisoft has both a new mainline Far Cry and a separate extraction-flavored Far Cry project in play, they are not crazy for hearing the old familiar corporate hymn underneath it. Stretch the brand, chase the trend, build the shell. Hope the audience mistakes strategy for vision. Now, to be fair, here is the uncomfortable beat. This is the one a lot of rant channels skip because it ruins the easy applause line. What if they are right? What if the old Far Cry formula really was getting stale? What if a timer, a new engine, sharper movement, and a more aggressive structure are exactly the shake-up the series needed? Fine. I am not allergic to the idea of change. But that does not erase the problem. It just changes its shape. Bold ideas only work when a studio is confident enough to commit to them cleanly. If those same ideas are coming out of a frightened publisher, a shaky pipeline, and leadership churn, the audience is not going to feel daring. They are going to feel management panic trying on innovation like a cheap Halloween costume. So, when somebody asks why Far Cry feels unstable, the answer is not hard. Because the publisher itself looks unstable. Games do not fall from the sky. They come out of leadership, money, culture, trust, and the people who either stay or leave. When the corporate foundation cracks, the product is the first thing to drop through the floor. And the long silence since Far Cry 6 only makes that worse. Empty space kills momentum. It drains goodwill. It lets rumors become the public story because the publisher left the stage empty for too long. Finally, the verdict. Because all of this only matters if it points somewhere. There are only a few believable paths from here. The game slips again and silence keeps rotting confidence. Ubisoft reveals it early to stop the bleeding, but the reveal feels sterile and overmanaged. Or the game arrives technically competent, but spiritually dead, which is honestly the most insulting outcome of all. Because then, the real issue was never delay. The real issue was that Ubisoft rebuilt the pipeline and still produced a ghost. So here is the clean answer to the opening question. No, this does not look like Ubisoft merely fumbling one Far Cry game. It looks like Ubisoft revealing in slow motion what happens when a giant publisher becomes risk-averse, leadership-heavy, and trend-hungry. It is just desperate enough to bolt an extraction shadow onto a franchise that needed clarity, not more fog. If the reveal looks sterile, you will know why. If the world looks denser but less reactive, you will know why. If the timer feels like pressure without purpose, you will know why. And if Ubisoft ever tries to sell this thing back through premium access, special editions, or any flavor of play early nonsense, a lot of people already have the answer loaded, chambered, and ready to go. Absolutely not.